6 wives, 2 beheaded. That's the version your history class gave you. The big king with the turkey leg. Wives swapped like personnel decisions. Here's what they didn't tell you. Henry VIII was not a romantic gone wrong, not a monster who got lucky with power. He was a strategist. Every single marriage was a calculated political move, a psychological weapon deployed at a specific moment for a specific purpose. The women weren't victims of his emotions. They were pieces on a board, moved when useful, removed when not. Before the psychology, one thing your history book got completely wrong about young Henry. Contemporaries described him as the most dazzling prince in Europe, not just physically, though he was genuinely athletic, over 6 feet tall. He spoke 6 languages. Composed music still performed today. The scholar Erasmus called him a man of universal accomplishment. England wasn't just accepting Henry when he became king. They were ecstatic. Hold that image, because what happened to it is the real psychological story. Somewhere between the brilliant young king and the paranoid tyrant of his later years, something broke. And what broke it was unchecked power. Henry's first marriage was not a mistake. It was a masterpiece. Catherine was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, the most powerful royal couple in Europe. This alliance gave Henry diplomatic credibility with the most powerful empire in the known world. For years it worked, but she couldn't produce a male heir. In 16th century royal politics, that was catastrophic. Not because Henry was heartless, because without an heir, everything he'd built faced a succession crisis that could tear England apart. So Henry decided to end it. And here is where the dark psychology begins. He didn't execute her. She was the niece of the most powerful man in Europe. He didn't just leave her. The church wouldn't allow it. What he did was more psychologically sophisticated and more personally devastating than either. He tried to make her stop existing. Not physically, psychologically. He declared the marriage had never been valid, removed her from court, separated her from her daughter, forbade anyone to call her queen. Anne Boleyn is where this story becomes extraordinary, because Anne was the only woman in Henry's life who understood the game and nearly beat him at it. She wasn't the most beautiful woman at court. What Anne had was psychological acuity. She understood Henry, she understood power, and she understood something no other woman had fully grasped. Availability kills desire. Every woman Henry had ever wanted, he'd obtained relatively quickly. The moment possession was complete, his interest declined. He needed the pursuit. Anne denied him for 7 years. In an era when the King of England's requests were not declined without serious consequence, she declined, consistently, warmly enough to keep him chasing, distant enough to ensure he never caught her. But here is what Anne miscalculated. She understood how to make Henry chase. She didn't understand what Henry was like once he'd caught what he'd been chasing. The moment they married, the psychological leverage she'd held for 7 years vanished overnight. And she, like Catherine, failed to produce a male heir. What followed was the most chilling display of manufactured reality in Tudor history. He didn't just decide to be rid of her, he constructed a narrative, had her accused of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. Charges historians now widely consider fabricated. Historians document something extensively about life in Henry's court that reads like a textbook on institutional psychological trauma. Everyone was afraid, all the time, not of immediate visible violence. The terror was more sophisticated and more effective. The terror was uncertainty. Nobody ever knew from one day to the next whether they were in favor or out of it, whether something said 3 months ago was about to be reinterpreted as treason. Henry created this environment deliberately, not through explicit threats, but through unpredictability, through the willingness to turn completely, without warning, on his closest confidants. Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, Thomas Wolsey, men who'd served him with absolute loyalty for decades, gone, destroyed, executed. Catherine Parr, the 6th and final wife, survived by understanding something none of the others had fully mastered. She made herself indispensable, not as a wife, not as a romantic prospect, as a political necessity, a stabilizing force, a mother figure to Henry's children, someone the court genuinely needed to function. She made herself something Henry had never encountered, someone he couldn't afford to lose. Even then, even with that perfect positioning, she came within weeks of arrest on heresy charges in 1546. She survived only because she received intelligence about the warrant before it was served, and managed to talk Henry out of it in a private conversation historians still analyze for its psychological precision. What the psychology of Henry VIII actually teaches us, beyond the drama, is what happens to a brilliant person who receives total unchecked power and is simultaneously surrounded by people too afraid to tell them the truth. Power without accountability does something specific to human psychology. It creates a reality distortion field. Your version of events becomes the official version. Natural consequences get insulated from you by people whose job is to manage your comfort rather than reflect your reality. 6 wives, 2 beheaded, a church broken, a country rewritten. History calls it the story of a king's marriages. It's actually the story of what unchecked power does to the human mind when nothing and no one is allowed to say no. Next video, we go back even further, to a woman who operated in a world just as brutal as Henry's, surrounded by men with armies and empires, and outmaneuvered every single one of them. Not with force, not with politics, with her mind alone. You think you know her. You don't. Not yet. Throne of mind. Know the game. Know the players.